Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Quantum Nurse Freedom International live stream. And we're very excited today. Post Christmas for others, for the rest, they're continuing their celebration. So we hope that we could contribute to their celebration through this conversation. So if you know that this is meaningful for you or it could help someone else, please don't forget to share, like, and subscribe and follow our guest. Okay. So, in this platform, as you all know, we always dive into the stories, ideas, and voices shaping our world today. And in this episode, we're honored to have an extraordinary guest, and he's a repeat guest, and that means we really like him, correct? And he contributes a lot to all of us. And our guest is Dr. Reza John Vedadi, and with his expertise as a renowned filmmaker for over 12 years already, exploring the West Asian and Muslim identity through the lens of over 50 powerful documentaries. He's going to lead us in this conversation, and we thought that the topic title would be Syria in Crisis, the Coup and the Regional Power Struggle. So today, with his in intimate understanding coming from the region and the historical fabric, for sure he will help us explore and maybe like peel off layers of this crisis, because there's so many layers and so many players involved, and the human stories are mostly overshadowed by geopolitics. And it's really even crazy. There's so many things coming out in the social media, and sometimes I can't take looking at all the videos. I'll just take a glimpse of them, and then I stop looking at them and just follow the people like Dr. Reza John Vedadi to really help me understand. So welcome to this platform, everyone. And Dr. Vedadi, thank you very much again. I know you're busy, you just relocated, you move your family for all the best reasons in the world, but here you are. Thank you.
Thank you for having me once again. It's wonderful to be with you.
And of course, I'm always honored that my buddies Drago Bosnick, our special guest host, is, and also Hartmut Schumacher, my forever friend, is always joining me. And so, I guess I wanted to see maybe we could start, Dr. Bidadi or Reza, which, if that's okay, I call you that. That in through your documentary expertise and through this lens, with over 50 documentaries that you have done on West Asian and Muslim identity, so how does the portrayal of the Syrian crisis in global media impact in perceptions of Muslim and Arab cultures? And of course, the follow-up question would be, what misconceptions do you aim to challenge?
Um, I think to understand the Syria, we have to look at it in the broader context, in historical context, before zooming in to see the kind of daily updates of what's happening and who's ruling and who's been removed. This kind of changes. We have to understand Syria in the context of the region and in the history of the region. Syria, or as the Arabs call it, Sham, is a region or kind of a place that goes back thousands and thousands of years of history. Damascus is one of the oldest capitals in human history that has been consistently in has habitants living in it. And so to understand this in the broader context will enable us to then understand what's happening right now. And if you can imagine, Syria is in a very strategic point in the West Asian region, right? It's close to the Arabian Peninsula on one side. To the north, it's close to Turkey, and closer to one side to the Mediterranean. It's touching the Mediterranean, and on the other side, it's touching Iraq and closer to Asian continent. And another part goes towards the direction of Africa. So it plays a very crucial point, and for thousands of years, it's a point where empires have come conquer, to use, to go to the other parts of the world. And so that has continued over the centuries up to where we are now, where it was initially, before it became a republic, Arab Republic, was part of the Ottoman Empire. And so when the Ottomans lost First World War and they were weakened, and the French and the English decided to literally carve up the region, Iraq, and create Kuwait and Lebanon and Syria and Palestine, which then they gave to the Zionists. All of this region were almost like provinces that were being governed by the Ottomans, by the Turks, and before that by previous empires. It's not something that the Turks invented, but they took it over in the last 300-400 years because they were the dominant Muslim power in the region. And so when it was carved up, you have part of Syria which is connected to the Kurdish group of ethnic people. So you have Kurds in Iraq, in Syria, Turkey, and in Iran. And so they decided to carve up these regions, and some parts were, mandated to be controlled by the French. And so that's why you have in Lebanon French a dominant language and a dominant culture. And then you have, if you go to Iraq and Kuwait, in these places, English is the dominant. Where I am right now in Oman, the plugs that they use to put, and this is I always, when I speak to my friends, I said, if you want to know who ruled or who has major influence in which part of the world, look at the plugs they use for electricity. When you go to the regions that is influenced by the British, it's the three plugs, 1, 2, 3, with the switch. And if it's not influenced by the British, it's influenced by the Americans or the French, who will have, their versions of what the plug is. And so right now, I'm in Oman, I can see a three plug. If you go to Iraq, it's, three plug. If you go to the Syrian, it will be different. And so I think once one understand that Syria plays this role in the powers that fight each other and then do deals with each other, it's better than to understand how Syria got to this point where within less than a week or around a week, 5, 6 days, a complete, government that, yes, the government was sanctioned and it had wars and it was weakened and so forth, but it collapsed like, like never anyone had seen in the last, several decades. A government could collapse so easily and just wither away and disappear. And this relatively unknown to the public, but we would know who they are because we follow the history of Syria. That this group of 20, 30,000 jihadist fighters come and take over a majority of the country. I haven't taken the whole country because some of it is occupied by the Americans, some is still under the hand of the the Kurdish groups, some in the north, west, under different groups who are anti. This group has taken over. Israel had decided to occupy a part in the south. So you have this country that's just fallen into bits at the moment, and we're at the beginning of the euphoria of those who are very anti-Assad. And we'll come to the discussion of who Assad was and how he came into power, and I don't want to use the word good or bad. We'll discuss what he had done, and then audience can decide what was good and what was bad. But you had this situation, so we can understand a little bit better context.
Thank you. Thank you for just an overview of brief history. I like I like the way you help others to understand through the electrical plug. And I kind of say also to others that whatever, as you said, here the other language is this, the other language is this. That's also same thing. I guess same with us in Asia, right? So like if there are certain parts of Asia that they know how to speak French, or most of them went to France for school, and then us again, most of us went to or attracted to them. So thanks. That's one way of trying to understand these things. And so, if they have divided Syria before, but now isn't it that they're doing the same thing, or even micro dividing Syria? So do you think there will ever be Syria in the future, it as they've been trying to preserve Syria from with that
Well,
14 years of struggle?
there's this concept of balkanization, where they find a country that, so we're talking about the world being carved up into two or three groups of people. One is the kind of dominant, at the moment, predominantly dominant hegemonic imperial power, which is led by the United States, closely followed by the EU and Australia and Japan and South Korea, where their foreign policy is dictated to them. They don't have an independent foreign policy, so they don't decide for themselves. You know, Australia being a major, its biggest trading partner being China, talks about, we need to defend ourselves against China, but they're your biggest partner. What are you talking about? But that's clearly a talking point from the United States, and it feeds down to these little countries that are allied or subservient to them. The other group are countries that resist the kind of US-led empire, which could be, a group of countries that are Iran, Yemen, Syria before it collapsed, several other countries. And then you have countries which try to, or Russia as well now, some of the countries that try to play the middle ground, say, look, we're not against anyone, we just want to live, and get on with everyone. And then you have, countries like China and several other countries that try to get on with everyone because it's in the interest of everyone to get on. A general in the Chinese army was asked, what's the biggest worry that you have, or a politician? And he said, how to feed 1.3 billion people a day. He's not worried about, certain other things around the world. He needs to make sure that businesses continue, manufacturing continues, money is created so people can have an average life in China, because 1.3 million people, even if 1% are unhappy, that's something like 13 million people, the size of the country, that can, be angry, and so we have to take these things into context. And so this three groups that we were discussing, the main group wants to be dominant in the world, in politics, in economy, and in military. So it decided to use the divide and conquer methodology that the British really, did really well. And they said, okay, if Syria is united, if it's separated, it's easier to control it. Because when you have 5 people ruling over a small area of land, it's easier to pit them against each other and then be the one who I'm outside saying, oh, let me be the friend of all of you and try and help you, as opposed to one person who controls the whole of resources of that place. So they want to do this with Iran. They've done it to some extent with Libya. They wanted to do it with Iraq, separated into 3 countries, because this is easier for them to then control the region, making people fight each other while they're literally taking the oil and resources and the wheat. So I think it's very important that we bear the idea that it's in the interest of the enemies of Syrians and Syria to separate it into smaller groups. It's in the interest of Syrians and the people of the region, except Israel, that the Syrian people come together, which they may do. We can't say that it will be separated forever. Why is it not possible for them to come together and say we can have maybe a federal system where there is a certain level of autonomy? There'll be one not centralized government, there'll be one government overseeing everything, but there'll be like we have in Switzerland or whatever, or in Germany. So there is that can continue. Or you have in Iraq at the moment, where Kurdistan has a certain level of autonomy, but it's still part of the Iraqi identity, Iraqi nation. And so they carry the one passport, but within that passport now is included English, Arabic, and Kurdish, as opposed to before, which was just English and Kurdish. So it's possible that that will happen to it. I think, in my opinion, the new person who's taken over, his name was Jolani. Now he's done a new branding and he's become Al-Ashara, and he's basically the one who was used to get rid of Assad. Will he be the one who remains to see what happens? We don't know, because he's not the one in charge. Whoever enabled him to have his troops and his military equipment and his ability to come into Syria will dictate to him what they want. Because if he genuinely cared about, his name was supposed to be Jolani. He's supposed to be from the Golan Heights, area which is occupied by Israelis. But he said, we don't want to have a war with Israel. That's fine. They don't have to have a war with Israel. But at least you can say, you need to leave our country. If you're too weak to fight them, that's fine. We can understand that. You have to be practical, but at least verbally say something in the sense that we do not accept Israel coming into Syrian land and taking over, and they have to leave, and they have to leave, go back to the 1973 or whatever borders it was. So I think that you have to be careful where when we get the news, how we digest it. Because when I was reading BBC, they tried to frame it in a very specific way. Or CNN, when we saw recently how they, put a fake news out. There was a guy who was in prison for 3 months, but he was nicely shaven and his nails were all done. So we have to know that these news outlets are constantly lying to us and trying to frame something for the audience. So I always ask the audience, look at history, look how things have developed over the last 100 years. And then when you read the news, you can filter out the rubbish that they add into the news.
So very true. Do you have any thoughts on maybe or any kind of signs or patterns or connecting it to the incoming new administration, fairly new to United States, Trump coming in for January, or does it have anything to do with what's going on in Ukraine? Because there's also in the alternative media on some day that they're pretty good in connecting the dots for what could be happening now and why suddenly this thing happened. So anyway, I just wanted to know your thoughts on that. And um, maybe Drago or Hartmut would chime in after.
Okay, I'll say something quick and then we can have our colleagues chime in as well. From the different information that's come out, this didn't happen suddenly. So Iran was warning, and I think even Russians were warning Assad for several months before that there's a buildup of troops in Idlib and they want to attack Syria. And from other news that come out that the Turks who were supporting the attack and the Americans, they didn't expect it to be so successful. And then from the other side, you had Bashar Assad himself wanting to lean more towards the Arab League, to the Persian Gulf Arab countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia, to be almost welcomed back in. And there's like, come back to us and leave Iran and Russia, and we'll give you money to rebuild your country, or we'll help you rebuild your country. It's interesting because they're the ones who spent billions and billions, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, to destroy, to separate, and to cause a civil war in Syria. So for someone as a politician to be so naive is not unexpected, because Bashar Assad didn't want. He was never a politician. He was a doctor, eye specialist, right? Studied in the UK, living in the UK. His father is the leader of, president of Syria. His older brother, who's supposed to be groomed to take over, dies, and then he's brought in to rule. And his heart was he's not a ruler. He shouldn't be ruling that country. The country should have elections, and people should choose who they want. But we'll get to that maybe later. So this idea that these countries are advising who want Syria to stay as one, and he doesn't listen to them. He's, I think maybe he got tired, maybe he had enough, maybe he couldn't take it anymore, and he just wanted to pack it up. And he's like, no, I was a doctor, I was an eye surgeon, I never wanted to rule a bunch of people. I just want to go. He took some money and with his wife and family went to Russia or wherever he's gone. I don't know. But the idea is that he was being warned that this is happening, and it was a long plot because of the sanctions and the fact that Americans were taking the oil, not allowing him to have access to oil that is, Syrian oil, so he can use it to pay his military and civilian infrastructure, and the wheat and all of these things. So this was all happening after 10, 15 years of really brutal difficulty for the people of Syria. And the Syrian people are the ones in the middle who suffered the most, because they just want to have a normal life like me and you, right? But then they've got these powerful countries and these empires who literally abusing whoever comes into power or whoever they bring into power just for geopolitics. And they just want to live their lives. Most Syrians were not running away from Syria going to Europe, if you remember, pre 2001, 2011, 2012, 2013. The reason why they started doing that is because there was civil war and people getting killed in the middle, right? So you got Syrian troops attacking, killing civilians, collateral damage. You got then the rebels or the jihadists They're doing the same, and Syrians in the middle, like, look, we're just dying. We're not on the side of any of these two, but we're dying in the middle. So let's leave. Then you had 1 million of them who came to Europe, and I think 2 million went to Lebanon, a small, tiny little country, and I think 3, 4 million went to Syria. So there's millions of them who've left, and most of them won't come back because Syria is many years away from being a settled, what's it called, cohesive society. Like at the moment, they're burning Christmas trees. So people are chanting, "Oh, Syria is free," but not if you're Christian. Be careful. Syria is free, but if you're a minority, be careful, because if you say anything other than what the jihad is like, they may kill you and execute you and drag you into the streets. And recently, I read in the news today that 14 of the new kind of people who've taken power, the new government, were killed with clashes with. They use pro-Assad, but are they pro-Assad? Maybe they're just anti-jihadists. We don't know. We have to investigate more. So I think it's we have to be careful that how we look at this, and I want our colleagues to chime in so we can take it from there and add more context.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because military is my field of research most of the time. I know that the Syrian Arab Army actually had one of the strongest air defense systems in the Middle East, and in fact in the world when it was built. And it was a big deterrent for the Israelis because they couldn't just fly, over any part of Syria and bomb whatever they wanted. What they were usually doing, and I'm pretty sure a lot of viewers already know this, they would fly over Lebanon and then fire the missiles over the mountains, and then they would hit something. But they would not usually. They would avoid flying over Syria. And now, when the government fell to the terrorists, but we had what was the largest Israeli air operation ever to destroy these SAM sites and these other air defense systems, and they launched 450 strikes. So just to give people a perspective of how big this air defense network was, and if it took them well over a week of constant bombing to destroy it. Now we can only imagine like how much it would take if there was someone manning those defenses. And I think the air defenses were probably well, we could say the stepping stone of Syria's sovereignty. Now, with that gone, how can we expect, even if let's say a miracle happens and these anti-terrorist forces that are now in the border region of Lebanon, even if they push back all the terrorists, how are they going to rebuild the country if they don't have their defenses to fight off the Americans or anyone else? Do you think it's possible to rebuild anything or to rebuild sovereignty without proper defenses?
I would like Helmut to come in and add a little bit, and then I want to add something after that.
Well,
Okay.
in my opinion, I have a more question about the minorities in Syria, because you mentioned it that anyone who is against the jihad is in danger or can be killed, and it's in my opinion it's very weird that the leader now in Syria are celebrated like the people who brought the freedom and peace. Maybe for the Muslims, but not for the minorities. And for example, the German government, they already made an audience. They already made a meeting with these guys, and it is so embarrassing that our German government, they refuse to accept any asylum inquiries from Syria right now. So people who really would need to come to escape from this country are not allowed to come to Germany anymore. This is very strange. Yeah.
Well, this was the issue, wasn't it? When they came, it was people who were fleeing Bashar Assad's government, But now that these group of people who were literally on America's terrorist list until a few days ago,
Yes.
$10 million bounty for Jolani, and they were literally members of Al Qaeda and heads of Al Qaeda groups and everything. these people have taken over, and it's very clear from the indications of what happened in the last 15 years of how they treated minorities, especially with ISIS and what they did in Iraq and Syria before, because they have the same kind of theological outlook. And what they're kind of doing now, how they're treating minorities, that at any point, this facade of, oh, no, 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 we respect diversity and blah, 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 this is going to fall apart, because Jolani is not going to be able to hold back this rage that comes with the Takfiri ideology, which is anyone who's not following our very strict interpretation of Islam, even if they are Sunni, they are kafir and their blood is permitted for us and their women are permitted for us, and so let alone someone who's a Shia, Alawite, Christian, Druze, atheist, secular, all of that stuff. So this idea is I'm waiting to see, because I can start to see already groups of Syrians who are starting to take up arms and kind of group together. And Ayatollah Khamenei said something very, very interesting about 5-6 days ago, a week ago, when he spoke the first speech they gave after the collapse of Bashar al-Assad. And he indicated that there are groups in Syria, because when you looked when the jihadists came in, there wasn't any overwhelming population out cheering for them. There was a few thousand, but Syria is a country of 20, 30 million people. Damascus is a major big city. When Ayatollah Khomeini came back, if you guys remember, from 1979, there was 4 million people in the streets of Tehran. The capital of Tehran's population was only 4 million people. If Jolani had even a minute amount of support, like these kind of individuals, there would have been thousands of, but there isn't, because a lot of people stayed at home because they know what's going to happen. So I believe in a very short space of time, several months, you start seeing groups that are organizing that would then become counter to what the group Jolani is, because he doesn't have many followers. 20, 30, 40,000 people is not enough to maintain a country of 30 million people spread the way it is. Okay? You need a large chunk of 20, 30% of the population to be on your side to be able to rule a country. Because you have then 20, 30% that are apathetic, they're not really involved, and you have 20, 30% who are against, and then you're able to manage a country roughly. I highly doubt that 30% of Syria, which is very secular society, very open society, in comparison to the other countries in the region, would want all of a sudden to become takfiri and follow a very specific, strict interpretation of Islam and have that applied where Christmas trees are burning and people's shrines are being attacked and burned, and possibly then will be churches. And I've seen videos already of these jihadists going in and breaking statues of Saint Mary and all of these things. And these are always, they still kind of like not fully free to express themselves. So once they are, it wouldn't be just statues that they're breaking. It will be people that they'll be beheading and cutting and killing. So I think that we have to be a little bit patient. The Syrian people themselves, already in the Kurdish region, they're resisting these groups, backed by the Americans. It's interesting. So you got Americans who were backing the Jolani group, but then also they're backing the Kurdish group, which is fighting the Jolani group. So it's going to be a very interesting time for us to sit back first and see how things develop. But 100% with the military that Drago explained, 100% the Israelis did not want any of this to fall into the hands of either Jolani, because they don't trust anyone anyway. Israelis don't trust anyone. They're to fall into the hands of Jolani or whoever comes after him. And so they knew that if he's removed, then he can't stay into power, and a group which is more pro-Palestinian comes into power, will they then use all of these resources and military equipment to then put pressure onto Israel? And as you said, they were attacking Syria for several years now. And people were always asking, why is Syria not striking back? Syria has a strong army and they've been well trained because they fought for several years. Why are they? And then there's all of these series, but we'll find out more later. That was Assad being groomed, or was he being misled, or was he being informed in a way that will detract him from attacking, because they were promised, the Arabs from the Persian Gulf region were promising him wealth and prosperity if he just stays still and have strategic patience. So we have to see in time how things like that will unfold.
And when I understand it so far correctly, one important thing is that by conquering the Golan Hills and the whole area until Damascus by the Israelis, I suppose the Israelis are now in control of the water of Syria. Is that correct?
This is what they say, that they're in control of the water. I think that comes into Lebanon and into Israel now. And I think they will use this as an excuse, but if you look at the map that they have on the soldiers, military soldiers' patches, they believe in this greater Israel, which is from the Euphrates, so that's all the way up to Iraq, all the way up to the Nile, not just the Mediterranean, but the Nile. And so there's already discussions about Sisi kind of putting down kind of like groups that are sympathetic to Jolani's movement. And so the Israelis use that as an excuse. Oh, Sisi is not strong, he won't be able to maintain Egypt, so we need to invade Sinai to put a buffer there. Everywhere's going to be a buffer, to put a buffer there to protect Israel against a possible Egypt that will become a jihadist Egypt. So they're using that as an excuse. But I mean, militarily, is it possible for Israel to expand all the way to the Euphrates? Of course not. They couldn't take Gaza. They're still fighting in Gaza. They're still literally Hamas fighters and Islamic Jihad fighters fighting them, and they've completely destroyed that place. It's like a apocalyptic film, where there's nothing left. It's completely destroyed. They couldn't take the south of Lebanon. The Hezbollah completely held them back and punished them. And so then you have all of these. You have the Shabi, and Iran won't sit back. Iran won't sit there allowing Israel to keep constantly moving its military closer and closer. They would have got involved in other ways. But I think at the moment, they wouldn't go too far, because then if they go too far, Jolani will look really bad, and then it will inspire others within even his own group to remove him and put someone else that they have no idea who this person is. And one of the reasons why the British and the Americans and the Israelis always keep someone and not necessarily, recently they started assassinating leaders, but before it's because they're like, we know how this person thinks, so we know what buttons to push to get what we want from this leader. However, if we kill him and someone else that we don't know comes into power, we don't know how they will think. We don't know how they will react. So they may even be more extreme than the one before. So I think that's something that we have to wait and see what happens.
Well, could we say that, I mean, Israel obviously, as you said, doesn't have the military power to take the region from Euphrates to the Nile. That's militarily impossible at this time, at least. But do you think that, as you said, they could use that as a buffer? So what they could just do is like create some sort of an alliance with Jolani, official one or an unofficial one. I mean, the unofficial one already exists, but let's say we already know that the Kurds are over the Euphrates, and Jolani and his guys control most of the country, the rest of the country. So, like, in a way, they already achieved what they wanted, because Syria, the sovereign Syria, is gone now, and these proxies, these terrorists already control the area that, these Zionists want to conquer for themselves. So can we say that in that way they've achieved the greater Israel in the north simply by eliminating a sovereign Syria?
Well, that's the thing, though. At the moment, you're right. There isn't a Syria that is pro-Palestine, but this is not a fixed situation. It's constantly changing on a daily, weekly basis. So we don't know if in several months' time another group will come into power that be more sympathetic to the Palestinian. We do know that Jolani said that Palestinians are only permitted to act in a political activist way in Syria, but they're not allowed to have any military or paramilitary operations here. So we already know, he's already stated then that I'm in support of what the foreign policy of Israel is. but we don't know how long he'll stay in power. He doesn't control the whole country, right? You still have America that has a big chunk, the Kurds and the Alawites and so forth. So we have to see that what happens in the next 5-6 months. If he's removed or through force or internal situation, if the next person comes in, he may even be part of the group that took power, but he may be more pro-Palestinian. We don't know. So we have to see how things turn out. I think it's too early to say that what happened is a permanent situation or a long-term situation. It's very, and don't forget, Iranians are not going to sit back and just not do anything. Russians are going to sit back, and yeah, Russians are engaged, with Ukraine, better than me, but they have interest in Syria, because if they lose that port that they have there, it's going to be difficult for them to reach other places. So Turkey is not going to remove, and then also you have Iraq on one side. Iraq has sent its paramilitary to their borders just in case there's some kind of crazy idea of them wanting to invade into Iraq, right? Interestingly, it's not the military that's gone there, but it's the paramilitary. That just goes to show that even in Iraq, there is this kind of divide of allowing almost like traitorous activity of not protecting the country. Like the military should be there, right? The paid professional military should be there, not the paramilitary that it was, came into shape in 2014 with Ayatollah Sistani's fatwa. But what I find interesting is that every time they remove or Syria or America comes into a region, in the long term, the group that benefits the most is the axis of resistance, is the Iranian group. If you remember, they invaded Lebanon, and because of that invasion, they created Hezbollah because it wanted to resist Israel and push it back. Hamas is a reaction of occupation of Gaza and Palestine. Yemen, Ansarullah, is a result of them trying to impose themselves onto Yemen. And it's a country that is very, economically weak and poor. However, it's able to create hypersonic missiles and hit Tel Aviv directly, to the point where 1 million Israeli citizens are running to shelters, right? With only a few missiles that they're able to hit. And obviously, it's really, really upsetting Israel. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sending planes to bombard the airports and the ports. They would have left it. But because they're so angry that, we can't allow this to continue, they decide to react like that. And so every time Israel, America, and Europeans come together and try to remove someone, you see a group that comes up and in time becomes very powerful and independent, as in strong, able to look after itself. Hezbollah will be able to look after itself, even though that land connection between Iran, Iraq, Syria is at the moment disconnected, but it's able to control itself. It has a city created underneath, dug in the ground, that is able to create missiles and weapons to defend itself. It doesn't necessarily need Iranian weapons immediately. It can go on for months, if not years, to fight. Same for Ansarullah. So in Syria, I believe it's possible that what will happen is you will have a group that would be very pro-axis of resistance, and it will become a part of Syrian culture and society and politics, where it won't be easily removed, because it'll be Syrian natives who will come up and resist. So we have to see. But these are my guesses from what I've seen in history that's happened.
I presume the Alawites will be, well, I mean, it will be logical for the Shias in the country to become that new group that you're talking about, because I don't see anyone else. I mean, I presume that some Sunnis who are more secular, might join them, but I presume that the jihadists will probably try to play into the religious differences in the country to ensure that it never comes together, because I mean that's that's essentially their job. They did pretty much something similar in my country in the 19s when it was destroyed by this U.S. invasion that was euphemistically called the Yugoslav Civil War, or whatever you want to call it. And this is why, in general, I don't use the term Syrian Civil War, because it was never a Syrian Civil War. It was mostly like an invasion from different countries. And if we look at where these rebellions started. It's all border regions. It's either Israel or Turkey or Jordan or parts of of the border with Iraq and so on. It's always in these areas where they can implant their agents. And I mean, also the very fact that we had like half of the Jelani's army are essentially guys from all over the world who have been brought in, especially from Central Asia and these other countries. So it seems to me that obviously this was an invasion. I think a lot of Syrians will push back, but do you think that it's possible to create a militarily viable group that's going to include more people than just, let's say, Shias? That could be like multinational or multi-ethnic or multi-religious, but that will be able to push back simply based on their, Syrian patriotism.
I think because of this, the Shia theology and Shia view of Islamic history of martyrdom being a core principle within Shia Islam, Imam Hussein, which plays a pivotal role in the identity of all Shias, that enables Shias. It makes Shias more able mentally to enter that field, whereby they will be willing to sacrifice for the greater cause. If they're able to do it well, in the sense that it's organic and it's created within the culture of the Syrian, what we understand as Syria right now, I don't doubt that there will be different groups that will join them, but the core will remain a Shia identity. Like if in Lebanon, if you look, there's still a lot of Sunni and Christians that support Hezbollah, but it's really the Shias that are the backbone of Hezbollah's organization, right? So I think that this is possible, and I think what Syrians will probably see is that those who are either Shia or whatever that are fighting against the outsiders who've come in are genuinely doing it to protect greater Syria. Some of them will still see them as agents of proxies, the Iran or whatever, because of the news and sectarian views that they have. But I think majority of Syria will realize, no, okay, we need something that is not related to the Ba'ath party or to this party or that party. They're Syrian, and it's organic from inside. And its core principle is to defend Syria and its border and its culture and its people against any kind of invasion or oppression, which happened in Iraq. So we had Hezbollah in Lebanon, we had Ansarullah in Yemen, Hashishabi in Iraq. So it's very viable that this will happen in Syria, but how and not how long it will take time, because you need to find leaders, you need to train them, you need to educate them. And I think people may misunderstand that when we talk about this, it's not only a military ideology. It's an ideology that is engrossed in serving the people. And one aspect of it would be charity, one aspect of it would be cultural, and one aspect of it is military, to defend the land from outside invaders like Israel and Americans or whatever. But I think it's going to take time. So we'll have to see how the Syrians themselves will come together. And already we can start seeing, if you look at the news, there's movements, thousands are coming, protesting, and usually young men, right? It's not going to be difficult to transfer this energy that they have right now into a direction where they become more organized, work together to create such an organization that is Syrian for the benefit of the Syrian, but also happens to be pro-Palestine and anti-imperial. Right, so these things are very kind of in tandem together. So it's organic when it happens. It's not necessarily we have to force these other elements into it. You can't be pro-Syrian, genuinely pro-Syrian, not Jolani Syrian, but pro-Syrian, and say, no, I'm happy for Israel to take one part and America to take another part, take our own. Then you're not Syrian. You're just a plant, someone who's come to put there to do an action, to do something for the outside powers, and then you'll be removed.
You're sounding very optimistic, and of course, I like it like that as well. And does that mean that what I'm hearing from, like, one of them is like Vanessa Billy having that information that there's movements, that there are remaining Syrian soldiers who haven't stopped fighting, and they plan to organize more. So, that I guess that's what you're mentioning. And although you mentioned the Syrian uh, natives, well, is there really more Syrian natives still than those who have come to really be proxies?
I mean, as I think Drago who said it, or
No,
Hartmut,
no. I
that
wonder. You mentioned about what I'm hearing is that it's not the end of Syria. It
mm.
may be. It may
Yeah,
be.
it's not the end of Syria. I don't think it's the end of Syria. No, no, not at all.
It's
Yeah,
always. It's very sad if it will be the end, because as most of us know, if they were struggling, resisting for 14 years and even more, it can't be the end. And as it's
I mean,
always.
people thought it was the end of, they thought it's the end of Iraq, but look at it now. It's fairly cohesive. Yes, there's always going to be internal problems, and there's a lot of issues because the America still has a base there and interferes within the Iraqi politics. But once that American base is removed, that influence of the U.S. empire on the Iraq is going to be waned. I mean, people don't realize this, but Iraq, when it sells its oil, the money doesn't go into the Iraqi central bank or Iraqi bank. Every time Iraq sells oil, it goes into a dollar account in the United States in New York. Every time Iraq wants to spend that money to do something to build the infrastructure of its country, it has to go and get permission from the United States to release the funds. And it's not release funds where they do a bank transfer, here's a billion to China, go and buy some machinery. No, they send them cash. So when that cash comes in a plane load, all of a sudden, from $1 billion, half of it will probably be fed into people's pockets. And so this is how they maintain corruption in that country, and this is how causes weakness. A lot of people are like, how is it possible that Iraq, has so much resources, but it's when you go to visit it, it's has so many poor parts. It's because of the corruption that America keeps breeding into the society there through these methods. And every time a prime minister wants, and I always say to everyone, look, you live in a country that looks like it's sanctioned, right? Your country looks worse than Iran. Iran is sanctioned for 40 years, looks like has better infrastructure than Iraq, right? So if you look like you're sanctioned, you're living as if you're sanctioned. I can't, even though it's not on a sanctioned list, technically Iraq, I can't send money to Iraq, you know that, right? No bank will do it from Europe because of the pressure from America. Okay, so the acting towards you as if you're sanctioned, you look like you're sanctioned, is not better for you to cut ties with these people that are causing this problem for you and be under sanctions, but then be free. The bases will be kicked out. There's plenty of other countries like China and Russia and Iran and other countries that can come in and help you build the infrastructure that you need. But then you'll be independent. You won't have a sanctioned country and your money going out and not being independent. You're having the worst of all of it and none of the benefits of any of it, right? But what happens is Iraq is a divided country, same as Syria. Kurds on one side who are having wonderful time taking the oil, selling it to all over the world, building up their pockets there. Not all of Kurds are benefiting from it. It's just a small group of people. And Erbil, a city and stuff. There's a lot of poor regions in Kurdistan as well. And they constantly have raids from Turkey and stuff. So then, you have this country which is divided into two, three large groups of people who are trying to vie for power. It's not Iran. It didn't have Ayatollah Khomeini who came in, and when he would wave his hand, things would happen quickly. They don't have that. They have Ayatollah Sistani, but he doesn't want to get involved in politics in that way. His theological Shia school of thought is, I only step in when it's necessary. Other than that, I leave Iraqis to decide for themselves and govern themselves and manage themselves, even if they're doing a bad job, right? So there's that two different schools of thought within Shia Islam, where you're involved in politics as a religious leader, or you step back and let the people do their thing. So Iraq doesn't have that. Syria doesn't have a leader like that who can come in, and majority of different people will say, okay, he knows best, let's follow what he has. And that's why these countries are suffering like as if they're in sanctions. I mean, Syria was, but they're not able to progress like in some ways Iran has. Iran has a lot of problems as well. But if you look at a country of 45 years sanction, and I'm going to Iran in 2 days. You know, you go there and everything's made in Iran. Sometimes good quality, sometimes bad quality, but it's a country that has industrial base. If you have a country that has industrial base, you have the ability to survive. Yeah, life will be tough. Things may be expensive, meat may be expensive, and groceries, and stuff like that. But Iran also has energy, which is cheap, and gas is cheap there, electricity is cheap, few petrol costs are cheap and stuff. But then you have other problems that, as I mentioned, because we also unfortunately have some corruption in Iran to do with the economy and stuff. However, Iran is still able to support these other countries or groups of axis of resistance, right? Sometimes with equipment, sometimes with knowledge, sometimes with political backing, sometimes with cultural backing, whatever. So Iraq and Syria don't have those benefits of a cohesive group of people with one leader. And so that's why it takes longer time. It will be more like Syria, it will be more like Lebanon, where you have one group who may become a strong defender of Lebanese territory, Hezbollah. However, they don't run the country. They're involved in politics, but you have other people who are involved in running the country. And they're just a part of that group. So we have to see what happens with Syria if they can, as you said, muster up these people together.
Yeah, in my opinion, we have four groups. We have the leader right now. We have Erdogan. We have the Americans, and we have Israel. And Erdogan also will not give away the territory what he's going to conquer. So and if the resources are, let's say, shared among these people, there is no chance for the Syrians to rise in their economy, and also in agriculture. Yeah, they will. The Americans like to give orders how the agriculture has to be. Yeah, this is we can see it in Ukraine, where which has one of the best soil in the world, is all sold to BlackRock. Yeah, and I suppose Syria will be exploited until the last bone. Yeah, and especially with the military complex of USA. Some say the dollar was back. Well, first the dollar was gold backed, then it was oil backed. Now it's military backed, and we have seen it with the Wagner Group, who attacked a basement in Syria from Americans. They were destroyed within hours. And also, if Syrian people, if Syrian fighters would, let's say it this way, on the one hand, they maybe can conquer Damascus, they can conquer the city and a specific region, but they will never conquer the areas where the resources are. Yeah.
No, the Americans won't trust them. The Americans will keep it as long as they want, as long as they can. And that then when an independent internal group uprising is strong enough to push them out, then maybe. But they will never go themselves. Why would they go? They're using that oil to send it to Israel and make money to do the CIA proxy wars and pay this and that. Of course, why would they give that up?
Yes.
Why would they give that up?
But what we don't understand is that Assad never didn't, let's say, he refused the offers from Russia and from China to establish the economy. This is something what I don't understand so far. Yeah, what I don't understand, why he refused it, why he trusted more the Gulf states. This is for me something what I don't understand.
If you think about, as I said, he was a doctor, right? He was Arab and he was a doctor. He wasn't. He didn't. He didn't come to power through a coup d'état. Conniveness. And I remember somewhere I read that his father said to him, "Never leave the side of Imam Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini." That means never separate yourself from Iran. As soon as he separated himself from Iran and Russia, what happened? he became weak. The Iranians and the Russians said, look, we will upgrade your military for you, we'll support you, we'll pay for it. But he still wanted to be welcomed back in the bosom and the arms of his Arab, the leaders of the Arab countries. That's his Arab side coming out. That wasn't his pragmatic side coming out of saying, if I maintain the military, the country will stay, and then China can come in and other countries can come in. And yes, UAE, you can come in, but on the parameters that I give you. This is my country. You don't decide for me how you want to come into my country and invest. I tell you what I want. If you want, you can get participate. If not, no problem. And then he went to China. I think he was in China last year, right? And China wouldn't invite him unless China had a long-term plan of, look, we want to work with you. China is very pragmatic. They have long-term plans. They stick to their plans. They will work with you if they decide to work with you. So this, when he was invited, it wasn't like, oh, you know, we have nothing better to do. Let's invite the president of Syria. There was a plan, but I think
the Gulf states are weak. They are pawns of let's say pawns of the Western complex. So
and the Western complex use those pawns to get into the mind of him and I don't know what word to use, trick him, persuade him, encourage him to shift away from, you know, the Iranian, Russian, China access towards the Persian Gulf access or the American access or whatever. But I mean, anyone, if any four of us sitting here not involved and have any intimate access to Syrian intelligence would think anyone who is sanctioned with America and then goes towards America is destroyed. Look what happened to Libya. Look what happened to Iraq. Look what happened to Afghanistan. So if they sanctioned you and they keep repeatedly saying he has to go, he has to go, he has to go, and the foreign policy never changes, no matter if it's Democratic or Republican or anyone, why would you in your right mind think that me going towards that direction, somehow they were like, oh, so benevolent towards me, and they'll be like so merciful and forgive me for all the crimes that I committed, and they'll just welcome me back? No, they're just softening you up, making you soft, so when they attack you, you have no will and energy to fight back. And that's what happened. He had a number of years to fix his army, but he didn't do it, right? He didn't take it. And so his army was demoralized. I heard somebody, his generals want $40 a month wages. All of these could be fixed. All of these problems could have been fixed by interacting with greater powers like China and Russia and other countries. But I don't know. Did he have the will? Maybe he didn't have the will to continue anymore.
Yeah, maybe the generals were paid by the West. If you have a salary of $40 a month, and the West will, let's say, another country offers you 40,000, which is nothing for them, but then you have the betrayers directly. Then you're directly surrounded by the betrayers.
I heard they were offering them $400, not 40,000.
400, yes, 400.
Yeah, not much. It's not much, really.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, and interestingly, I don't know how it is. It's in Syria right now with respect to the leaders, but I remember when the leaders came into power in Libya. There was mentioned that one of them was also, let's say, who participated in Guantanamo. And this is also interesting because several leaders of these revolution groups are part of, let's say, Guantanamo program.
Possibly, 100%. Yeah, it's not without that this would have happened.
Yeah, so they are completely mind controlled, supposedly.
And I think at one point Jolani was arrested and under American imprisonment. So it's possible he was tortured and then deprogrammed and then, you know, indoctrinated and said, we'll let you go. And, you know, sometimes people think that there's necessarily maybe a meeting between the CIA and Jolani. Okay, what do I do next? But what it is sometimes is they set the person up and they clear the path and have people around him who advise him in a certain way to take him to a direction. He doesn't need to sit there with a CIA agent and be told, okay, now go left, now go right, right? But from their actions, we see who benefits from the removal of Assad, which country is benefiting from. Thus, we know which country would have been involved. Thus, we know which country would have planned for it. It doesn't really, you don't need to take a genius to figure that out.
He might
To be
not
honest,
even
I'm
be
more.
he might be a completely different person, like an implant or a double, or who knows.
No,
Yeah,
it's,
possible.
if you if in the torture, it's like this: if the people get tortured so much that the soul in the body has a choice to die or to split, and the most people die, but several people survive this, and the soul split, and the splitted soul is completely programmed. You can program them driving tanks, driving flying MiGs, F-22, no problem at all. And then by a phone call, they can switch.
Well, they have the MK Ultra, so
It's MK Ultra, correct.
they had the MK Ultra in the 60s and in the 50s, and I mean, a lot of people don't even know that this was actually inherited after the Operation Paperclip from the Nazi scientists who actually created the entire program, and they've had 60 years to perfect it. So I presume that they can do a lot of things, and this is not even like a conspiracy theory. They had the program officially shot in the 70s, and we know that intelligence agencies don't simply shut down programs that are very, very useful for them. They can only expand them. So we can only imagine how far they've gone at this point. And I mean, as Reza said, I think we can see that whatever Giuliani is doing, and whoever he is, he's doing everything in the interest of the U.S. and Turkey and Israel, because he's the player of all three at this point. I guess it's going to be more crystal clear in the future, as Reza said, when we will see whose actual player he is. And in my opinion, he's the player of the U.S. He's supported by Turkey, but I think he knows who the boss is.
I just want to mention there is this famous picture from Guantanamo where we can see the people in their orange suits with the gloves, with the masks, and with the earphones, and they are on their knees on a white ground, and so the people cannot touch, they cannot hear, they cannot smell, they cannot see, but the ground is full of very sharp small stones, and this pain goes directly into the knees. And this pain and the pain in the knees is the only thing what they can realize. Anything else is completely out of control. And this pain will come so strong that the people will, it's the pain is unimaginable. This is how it works. But of course, you cannot see the small tiny stones in the picture. You only see the people wearing the gloves, the masks, and the earphones. Yeah. And
I have just one question for Reza regarding Turkey. So we've seen the role of Turkey, which is, as through most of its history, it's a backstabbing country, and they've been doing it for centuries or even longer. So can Turkey be trusted? I mean, considering the fact that Turkey has its own long-term neo-Ottoman, pan-Turkish plans, and there's also the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me on this, around a quarter of Iranian population are of Turkic descent, right? Or Azeri descent specifically. And we know that Erdogan has these dreams of a greater Turkey. So we know that he actually works with the Israelis. No matter what he says, he works with the Israelis because of Azerbaijan, which also has very close relations with Israel. So do you think that they have some long-term plan to carve up northwestern Iran, where the Azeris mostly live, and take it for them, because that would essentially join Turkey and Azerbaijan together without having to worry about Armenia, for example?
So the Iranian Turks I mean, the current president, he's Turkish. He's from the Azeri
Yeah.
background, and Ayatollah Khamenei, who's the leader of the revolution, he's also of Azeri descent. So Iran actually is being ruled technically by the Azeri Turkic people. However, the Azeris in Iran are very proudly Iranian. They are not. They don't see themselves as part of a greater Turkish empire. And even a lot of them say that the northern Azerbaijan or Baku or the Republic of Azerbaijan is really part of Iran because it was given up in the 1850 or 1860 Turkmenchai treaty with Russia when Iran was weak, and they took Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. These were all, Dagestan, Chechnya. These were all part of the Iranian empire at that time, Iranian kingdom. And if you look there, they have very strong connections to Iranian culture and Persian culture. And so they don't see themselves as that. So they won't easily be misled into thinking, okay, if we leave Iran, we're going to have a better time being with the Turkish, the Turkish lot. And I think I do agree that there's an aspect of Turkish society, Turkish politicians, and Erdogan being one of them, wanting to tap into this idea of a greater Turkic group of people so that he can expand his economy and he can expand his influence and possibly be the next kind of sultan or caliph over some new Ottoman empire. But that's not going to happen. Those times are gone now. Iraq will never allow Turkey to come and invade and take it back. Greece is not going to allow that to happen. It's part of their NATO. How would that would even work, right? And then even going to Syria, they're going to have problems just kind of maintaining that northern border because these jihadists will switch on you, like switch on the light on and off. That's how quick they'll switch on you. Don't think that they're loyal. No, they will then, come and attack. And things like this will happen. If you remember, before 2015, there wasn't 2013, there wasn't that many Salafi kind of like Takfiri bombings in Turkey. But then we had a few of them happening one after another, right? And that's when they got involved with Takfiri extreme jihadi groups. And that always feeds back into the country that kind of like nurtures it. And I don't really see Turkey as Turkey does get involved in the Azerbaijan-Armenian conflict. It's never liked Armenians, it was the Armenian genocide. And so it does try to support Azerbaijan. But then Iran has said that will not allow any borders to be changed, even between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that corridor that Azerbaijan wants to take, so then it can be directly linked to Turkey, Iran. No matter how weak I believe this president is, the Iranian establishment won't allow that to happen because then the north and south corridor between Iran and Armenia and Russia and Georgia will be cut. So Iran has seen that giving away even, few kind of kilometers here and there has, consequences that will reverberate for decades, if not centuries, onto a country. And if you look at the history, during the Shah's time, he gave land to Afghanistan, which now causes water problems in the Balochistan area. He stopped his claim on Bahrain and said, I renounce my claim on Bahrain. And then he took the 3 islands that are in the Persian Gulf that UAE that never existed now says, oh, this is all part of our countries. Like you didn't exist until the 1970s. What are you talking about? Is this idea of giving an inch away will cause problems. And so I think the Iranian government and system knows that and won't allow anything like that to happen. There will always be probably there's a new Turkish broadcasting, so I think funded by the Turkish government. They're broadcasting a channel that's going to be in Iranian, and so there's no doubt that in that there will be ideas about the greater Turkic people and Azeri being part of it and so forth. They will try their best, but Turkey has a lot of economic problems, right? And it's thinking that if I do these things, I will get some kind of economic benefits from the US. It may be short term, maybe they'll get something short term, but it's never going to be long term. They started with a lira, which was, I think, 2 liras or something for a dollar about 7, 8, 9 years ago, and it's something like 30 something dollars now, so it's deflated by 10 times. So economy has Turkey has a strong economy, you know, it has a strong military, but for some reason it's not able to keep control on the inflation, and it has a large amount of tourists that go there. So there's something going on with the economy and this inflation problem that it's causing it to keep constantly try to find avenues of maintaining the inflation, because it damages people's livelihoods as their money becomes weaker. And I'm in Oman at the moment, and in Oman, one Omani real is like almost $2.8. And so, how is a country that only has 1 million barrels of oil a day, no major infrastructure, no major industrial base, no Silicon Valley, tourism is not that much, it's not as much as UAE, for example. How is it managing to keep such a strong currency?
Yeah,
It's
I guess
because
it's because of the quantity of money, right? They don't.
No, it's not because of that. It's because of the relationship it has decided to have with the UK and the US. It has said, I will become the Switzerland of West Asia, Middle East. I won't support Palestinians. I won't do that. I will welcome people in, but I will be diplomatic. And they said, fine, you do that. We'll keep you as that. We'll keep your currency as it is. We won't have it impacted. And people can have a stable life in the sense that currency doesn't keep getting weaker. So commodities become, because everything's almost imported into Oman. Most of the things that come into Oman are imported. They don't have a lot of agriculture and manufacturing. But Turkey has a lot of stuff imported into Oman is from Turkey. So why is it a country that has a strong military, fairly large size, fairly educated society, large industrial manufacturing capability, one of the major airports in Europe, and yet still the currency keeps devaluing, right? And so it's trying to play this smart game of keeping the Zionists and the NATO-led US happy, to say, please don't keep devaluing our currency, because it's always the dollar, isn't it? It's the dollar that makes everything else in value. So then it becomes the currency loses power. So I don't know what game he's going to play, but I think his attempt at trying to create a greater Turkic identity will continue. We'll spend money on that, but if it's not rooted in reality, it will never be a actual real movement that will have consistency after he passes away, for example, or after the idea kind of fades within Turkish politics. Because all of these things need money, and if there's no money behind it, you can talk as much as you want, but if you don't provide money, it won't make a difference. I'll give you one example. I was in Qatar, and a lot of the taxi drivers are from Bangladesh. They said to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Originally, I'm from UK, but originally from Iran." He's like, "Oh, did you know 20 years ago, up to 20 years ago," he said this to me, 20 years ago, they were teaching Persian poetry, Hafiz and Sa'di, in Bangladesh schools. I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, they used to teach Persian poetry." And then they stopped. Why? Because the Iranian government didn't invest in Bangladesh, knowing that that exists, to continue it. If there's no funding, even if something that has been going on for centuries in that part of the world will stop, because you need funding. You need to bring these teachers and the minister to Iran, show them off, and say, "Look, we'll provide you with a aid of X amount of millions, so you can have textbooks, and your brightest students could be, come to visit the tomb of Sa'di and Hafiz, the greatest Iranian poets, and encourage the teachers." That costs money to do, right? They didn't want to spend that kind of money, so a language that was being taught itself without any effort from the Iranians stopped. So this will happen with Turkish identity, this greater Turkic identity that they want to foster. Yeah, they spend a little bit of money now, but when they stop spending money and it has no support, it will just wither away. It will die. If you go to Tajikistan, they are part of that Turkic Central Asian identity, right? But they see more themselves as Iranian Persian. Why? Because their language is Iranian. They're Muslim. identity. Even their flag looks like the Iranian flag with the same colors, different symbol in the middle, but similar colors. And so they are part of that for centuries. They've been part of the Iran, like Afghans and or some Uzbeks, and they've been part of that culture. So if Iran doesn't invest in that identity and help it grow and maintain itself, also that could wither away, because then they'd be more drawn towards Russia, because Russia may spend money, and they were part of the Soviet Union for 70 years. Now they spoke Russian for 70, 80 years. So it's really about who invests time, money, and effort, and how long they do that. We'll see how long Turkey will do that.
I have a question. How is it possible to get all the recruits for ISIS and Al Qaeda? Because let's say it this way, I suppose that the people in this area have a lot of common sense, if I say, and the Islamic religion is centuries old, thousands of since 600 years, since the 16th century, six centuries, and this is let's say a little bit different. And my question is, how do they get the recruits for this?
It's a very good question. I mean, the Muslim population is estimated to be around 1.5 billion, 1.9 billion, right?
Yeah.
You have around about maybe 100,000 jihadists all over the world, not just in Syria. If you want to count Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, if you want to count jihadists in Tajikistan, in Afghanistan, in Iran, in all of these Muslim countries, it may add up to about 100,000 who are willing to go and fight, have the idea to go and fight. So 100,000, what percentage would that be of 1.9 billion people, right? It's a specific percentage, but it's not, you can't say it's a majority idea. So what they do is, what I understood from listening to the news was that you had the Uyghurs from China who were probably fighting, that maybe their parents fought in the Afghanistan war, and then in the Chechen war, and in the Libyan and Syrian. And so their children would be brought up in a family like that. And he wants to be like his father, go and fight a jihad, small family within 30, 40 million Muslims that live in China, right? Maybe like 20,000 of them think like that, 10 to 10,000, 20,000. How do they go there? So they go to Malaysia. The Turks will have a passport for them to be able to enter Turkey with. Once they enter Turkey, that passport is removed from them. They bust to the south, taken to Idlib area where it's under, shoved into that kind of like environment. Sometimes they go with their families, wives, children. And so out of, they said 30, 40,000 people who were part of the Jolani soldiers, maybe 10,000 were foreigners, 15,000. We don't have numbers, but it wasn't in the millions or hundreds of thousands, right? So it's not a large, huge quantity. But unfortunately, we have, and the thing is though, I don't want to say all Wahhabis are jihadists, but all jihadists are Wahhabis, are Takfiris. You don't see within them Sufis, Sufi Muslims, right? You don't see within them Shias, Alawites. You don't see within them Ismaili Muslims. It's always the ones who believe that if I don't go and fight and kill every one of those people who isn't a Wahhabi extremist Muslim, even if they're Shia, even if they're Sunni, that's my aim. I have to do that, right? A lot of them might have, mental health problems. A lot of them they're not necessarily devout Muslims, and they don't see them reading the Quran and praying. They have no idea what Islam is. They just want to go and fight. They just, you had a group of them who went to Ukraine and wanted to fight Russians, not because they love Ukraine, but they just wanted to fight and kill someone and make it legal, right? So we have that within Muslim societies as well. People who are psychologically psychopaths, they want to kill, but they want to do it in a place where they're not going to get arrested and put into prison if they were in a normal country. So they go and join these kind of jihadi groups, and some of them are young. They're very naive. I remember a few cases from the UK that went. They were like 15-year-old girls who were born and raised in the UK from Bangladeshi background, and their parents were not Takfiri, Wahhabi extremists at all. And they got groomed to say, oh, look, it's going to be like an adventure. 15-year-old, what does a 15-year-old know? They can't even vote. Technically, they can't even buy cigarettes. They can't even buy, drinks. They can't even have, sexual relations within England. You have to be 16 to be able to do that. 15-year-old, buy the tickets are bought for them and taken to Turkey. And from Turkey, they go into Syria and they marry these jihadists. And the person, it came out after a few years, the person who did it was an agent who worked for the Canadian Secret Service. So was this a entrapment to see who's a terrorist? Then why didn't you stop them in the airport and arrest them there and bring them back to the UK? Why did you allow them to go into Syria? Or are the Secret Service of Canada and UK and America, I'm just asking, I don't want to be arrested by the UK Secret Service, I'm just asking a question. Are they involved in enabling people who are susceptible to join these organizations, to encourage them and take it there? These are questions. And I think if you do Google search in the news, you'll find evidence of what I'm saying in major newspapers. I'm not creating it. It's not conspiracy or anything like that. It's in the news that different agencies around the world, Western agencies, even Turkish agencies, have been involved in the process of grooming and enabling people to travel to this part of Turkey that will then go into the north of Syria to be part of these organizations and attack, and even part of ISIS at that point. So I think that, yeah, go on.
We also have to put in consideration that, for example, in Iraq, in Al Jarab prisons, there were hundreds of thousands of prisoners. Yeah, and there is a, let's say it this way, there is a possibility that hundreds of thousands were in this education program and now work as recruiters. We don't know.
But don't forget, a lot of those who were arrested would have been either Syrian or Iraqi who joined as well. So
they joined it?
No, so within Iraq and Syria, a lot of the people who joined these groups of ISIS and Al-Qaeda would have been Syrians who maybe even believed in the ideology, not necessarily, and we could have been devout Muslims, prayed and everything and believed it. But the ones coming from outside, so we specifically talking about coming from outside of Syria and Iraq who joined these organizations, some of them would have been ideological. They believed there's a jihad I need to go and serve. A lot of them would have been groomed, susceptible, and some of them would be mercenaries. They get paid $2,000 to come and fight in the recent one in Syria. It's not a small amount of money. You bring your family, you get paid, you save that money. Once the war finishes, you go back, you got $100,000 for 2-3 years of fighting, and you buy a house in the east of China. It's not that expensive to buy a house there, right? You can have a life. But what I'm saying is that these people coming are not always necessarily organic. Some of the times it's from outside influence. And I think one of the reasons what China was doing in that region was try to prevent the extreme kind of ideology spreading within that part of the Muslim region of China, that they're talking about a Chinese genocide and stuff like that, is this idea of preventing these group of people spreading the ideology, making normal Sunni Muslims of China become Wahhabi kind of Takfiri mentality of, seeing all other people as kafir and, their blood to be permitted, that kind of idea spreading. I don't necessarily agree that China was innocent or not innocent. That's not what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say is we have to understand that it happened because of a reason, right? This idea of cracking down on these group of people in China. And they still have these group of Uyghurs who go around saying that this is an independent country called East Tatarstan, or, they have a name for it. And yeah, each Turkestan, and it has to be separate from China. And of course, if you imagine you're in the United States and you say that Texas needs to be independent, what are they going to do to you? You think they're going to be like, oh yeah, go down, talk for free, say whatever you want to say? So I think we have to be a little bit fair, whatever background we're from, to see what things are happening for what reason, without necessarily saying that because it's a communist government, it's bad, or if it's not a communist government, it's good. So
You know, when it comes to the Turks, I think the issue, or I'm not specifically Turks. When I say Turks, this is mostly what people refer to the country of Turkey. But when we're talking about Turkic people, there's this idea that they're everywhere. But the point is, it was more like a cultural language domination, not really, ethnic or genetic. Because if we look at the Turks, they range from Asian looking to Middle Eastern. So they're not really like one ethnicity. I mean, we can't say that a person from Kazakhstan and a Turkmen from Syria and a person from the European part of Turkey are the same genetics. They look completely different. So there's no way that they are. But the point is, the Turks, when they expanded their empire, because they were a nomadic people, they expanded the language. And I mean, barely like 5 to 10% of the population of modern day Turkey are actually of Turkic descent. Most of them were like Turkified over the centuries. So I think the same happened, if I'm not mistaken, in Iran. I mean, the Turks were not living in Iran over the thousands of years when the Persian empires were there. Or if we look at just the last name of your president, Pezeshkian, suggests he's probably of Armenian descent. I think there's a lot of historical chaos happening across the region of Central Asia, and also you mentioned the Uyghurs of the East Turkestan. This area was called Xinjiang like 2,000 years ago when it was part of the first Chinese empires, and the people who live there, who are now of Turkic identity, they lived there before, but they were not of Turkic identity. They were of some other identity. So I think if the Chinese wanted to commit a genocide or something, they would have done that a long time ago. What I really think is they want to maintain stability, just like the Soviet Union wanted to maintain stability in Central Asia when it was part of its own country. So in that regard, I think what the West is doing is trying to exploit this problem to cause internal issues within China, just like they're using the same extremists to destroy other countries, including, let's say, former Yugoslavia, Iraq, now Syria, even Iran. I mean, I know that pretty much any terrorist attack that happens in Iran is pretty much orchestrated from the outside, and we can only imagine who the perpetrators are.
Well, with regards to the president, Pezeshkian means so Pezeshkian is actually Azeri. He's from Azerbaijan, Tabriz or Ardabil. And Pezeshkian, Kian in Iranian means someone who practices a field. So he practices medicine. So Pezeshk means doctor of medicine, and Pezeshkian means a practitioner of medicine. So he's not Armenian.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was like an Armenian thing, because I know that there are many Armenians.
Yes, Iran. Yes, they have Iran. Usually, Irans in Iran are, you're right, Armenian. But no, but he's a Shia and he's Muslim and he's Azeri. But this idea if you look at if you look at history from 1500, 1600 onwards for about 300 years, the two powers of the region were the Safavid and the Ottomans.
The Empire and
the Ottomans were the Turkics from Istanbul, and the Safavids were Turkic Azeri from Ardabil. And they were both very powerful, and the borders were kind of mostly the same, but sometimes they go back and forth. And they were great rivals, military and economically and everything. So this idea of some one Turkic I don't think is never gonna, because there's no such thing. They had this rivalry between and this idea of definitely saying there's one kind of genetic ethnic Turkic, something like that doesn't exist. Like you said, if you go to Turkey, you see someone who's blonde and blue eyes, who looks like they're from Norway or Sweden, and then you see someone who looks like they're from the Asian, and you see someone who looks like they could be mixed of Arab or something.
Yeah.
So there's been a mix of people in that. And I think this idea of countries, the nation state, the 100, 200 years idea of a nation state where this border with this flag and this language and this culture, religion is what defines you to be from that, that person from that from that country, as opposed to then being another person from another country and you see yourself differently is only 100, 150 years old in that part of the world, right? As I said before, if I was in Syria before the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire, I would see myself as someone who's from Sham or from the Levant, and I would easily move from Damascus to Beirut and say, "Oh, I'm from Damascus. I've married someone from Beirut." It wouldn't be I'm Syrian. I've married someone from Lebanon. I
Yeah.
married someone, or I know a friend who's in Jerusalem, or uh, you know, Baghdad or Basra. It was never like I married someone from Iraq or Amman, Jordan, or anything like that. It would be from the city, because that's how they saw each other, right? They would say, "Oh, they're Arabs from that part," as opposed to that country, because there was no concept of a country that we have now. And so these
Yeah.
countries are trying to figure out, what does a country mean? What does the ethnicity mean in the last 100 years? And even in Iran, like in Iran, we have multiple ethnicity, multiple groups and ethnicities, cultures and languages. We have Baluchis, very similar to Pakistani. We have Azeris, big chunk in the northwest. We have Arabs on the border with Iraq. We have Kurds on the western side. We have Persians, Fars from the center, and within that, there's different groups. We have Turkmen in the north, near Khorasan. So you have a wide range of languages, cultures, but they understand the modern state concept of we are part of Iran, the greater Iranian nation border, where my culture is Kurdish, my clothes is Kurdish, even I have a Kurdish language, but I'm also part of the Iranian idea of one nation state. If there's a war, I defend the borders. This is who I vote. I can vote for a president. I can vote for my member of parliament. That idea of a modern nation state that exists. How long these ideas remain, we don't know, because things always change over centuries, right? If we may go back to a feudal system, I don't know, maybe end of times and Jesus will come and the Imam Mahdi will come and all of this thing will be get rid of and it will be a complete different system. But at the moment, Syrians and Iraqis are trying to figure these things out, and they're never enabled to grow organically because there's always been war and interference and coup d'etat that was supported by CIA or this aid or secret agency or that secret agency. And like in Iran, we had a democratic prime minister in 1953. Him and the parliament decided to nationalize the oil. And what did the Americans and the British do? They did a coup d'etat. They sent President Roosevelt's grandson. He completely removed the elected prime minister, sorry. The Shah had fled. He got scared. He was a young kid. He fled. They said everything's fine. Come back. He comes back, and then he rules like a dictator. And there's no more elections until 1979 when he revolution happens, and we're able to elect members of parliament and the president and so forth. So that set us back 25, 30 years. What people don't know is in 1906, we had a constitutional revolution in Iran where a constitution was written down, where the king's role would be within the constitution and people would have a say. That was put down by the British as well. So that set us back 53 years or 50 years until the 1950s. So these interferences in these countries keeps putting back the growth of the country so the country can take a shape of whatever identity it will take shape of, right? And so I think that's why, again, Syria being interfered like this, it sets it back, in Iraq and all of these countries. So we have to see. It's very interesting. I do find the idea of culture, ethnicity, and race very fascinating, and how that influences how we interact with each other from the same country or the same region, and then also on a global scale. Because I think the metric of a human being's integrity is not because I'm from X country and I'm better than you, because I have a history that goes back. It's like, okay, you have a history that goes back 5,000 years, so what? I have a history that goes back 200 years. The metric should be our approach to justice and our approach on how we accept or disassociate ourselves from oppression. That should be the metric between how I judge an American, a Israeli, a Palestinian, Iranian, Syrian. If they are against injustice, then they're good people. Doesn't matter what their religious or ethnic or racial background is. Otherwise, this
Agreed.
idea of fighting each other because of race, it is such a illogical idea. No one ever wins. No one, even if your race overwins my race, ultimately you still won't be the winner. Because then another race will come in and say, "Oh, I'm superior," and it's just the most illogical, stupid thing that has been put into our brains, that if I'm from a certain genetic background and I look like a specific thing, I am more superior, right? This westernized conception of whatever that is. But justice should be what
I
we
think
measure ourselves.
I think the reason why, and that view, of course, is logical and it should be embraced by everyone. I think it also has to do with the Iranian culture, because what most people don't know, of course, is that Iran is actually one of the oldest civilizations in the world, and I mean in the history of the world, and it has continually existed as a civilization for, I think you said it, around 4,000 or 5,000 years, since the Achaemenid Empire, and maybe before that, since the Medians and all these other groups that were controlling the area. And I think they also saw themselves not as ethnic groups, but as like part of one society. And if I'm not mistaken, the Kurds were essentially like the soldier class of various Iranian empires, including the Sassanids and the Safavids and all these others. And essentially, we can see that in the fact that Kurds are pretty good soldiers in wherever they are, whether in Syria or Iraq or in Iran. We can see that the evolution of that part of the Iranic societies, it pretty much, we can see that the consequences of the history of those people and how this affects the current state of the region. So I think one of the reasons why Iran is so diverse but still so, let's say, aware of its identity is precisely that history. I mean, not a lot of countries can, say, "Oh, we're 5,000 years old and we've been fighting the good fight for all that time." And I think that's one of the reasons why the Iranian people rose up, because you really need to have a strong national identity. I'm not talking about ethnic, but specifically national and cultural identity in order to fight back.
That's true. That's true. I mean, they always say that in Iran there is oppression against minorities like Kurds and Arabs. Every time I go to Iranian, so you can get Iranian channels online now, or you can watch it in Iran. There's like 50 channels, 40 channels. There's ones in Kurdish, there's ones in Azerbaijani, Arabic. There's all different languages have their own TV channel that they can watch their programming in their own native language. And all their native languages and clothing. If you go to that region, people speak to each other in that language, their native language, Kurdish, and their clothes. You feel like you're in a different part of Iran. It's not like Tehran. It's not like you've gone into an area that is Kurdish identity. So I think a lot of the misinformation from outside is to try and denigrate the good things that the East tries to do. Like if you even look at Chinese money, they have Chinese, they have English, and they have a language that looks very similar to Farsi and Arabic, which is Uyghur. They use similar alphabet. They have some extra letters in there. And I was like, wait a minute, if this is only 30, 40, 50 million out of 1.4 billion, why are they making effort to put that language in the currency? I'm not saying China is an example. I'm not saying there's no problems there. What I'm saying is they never show the positives of these Eastern countries trying to show diversity, sometimes limited, but however, they only pick on things that don't show that, right? And so the audience and the people who live away from these societies don't have an idea and think, oh, these societies are constantly being oppressed by their leaders. They're not allowed to express themselves in their language and so forth and so on. And I've seen plenty of videos of the Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Revolution, constantly emphasizing to speak and teach your children the language of the culture that you're from. So if you're Azeri or Kurdish or Arab, teach that. They're going to learn Farsi in school, and it's part of society, whatever. Like me, when I was in England, I was teaching my children Farsi and my wife was teaching them Arabic. Why? Because I know that they will learn English in school. But them having two other languages unlocks part of their brain, enables them to know the culture where they're from and where they came from, to know where they're going to go, and enable them to learn a fourth and a fifth and a sixth language, French, German, I don't know, Chinese, Oriental, Hindi, whatever languages are going to be more, Spanish dominant in the world. Learn those as well, because the more languages you know, the more of the world you learn, and better communication you can have with people. And so that's what the problem with Western media and politicians is they don't fully express and enable audiences and their followers to know what's happening in the East. And so we always have this misconception about misunderstandings of what race is. And I always say to people, be proud of the culture that you're from, the race that you're from. And if there's been mistakes in the history of that culture, accept it, but also be proud because your father and your mother is from that culture. And if you know where your root is, you know how you're going to grow and where you're going to go. You shouldn't be ashamed of where you're from. Like, I know that in Iran, there may have been mistakes in history. I own up to those mistakes, but I'm also proud of the culture that I'm from. So I can pass that pride to my child so they know their root. Because no matter where they go, like if my child stays in the UK, they're going to look at her and say, okay, where are you from? Oh, I was born in London, UK. Yeah, but where are your parents from? If they're not ready for that question, yeah, but where are your parents from? That's going to hit them really hard. That's going to cause them identity crisis. And if they have an identity crisis, they will not know how to deal with themselves in whatever society they live in. But if they know what their identity is, no matter if they live in Oman or UK or Iran or Iraq or America, they know exactly how to deal with the situation that they're there with.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think the reason why they're not informing the rest of the world about certain things is not accidental. It's part of the demonization effort. And being a Serb, I know this for a fact. I mean, my country and my people have been demonized for decades before we were attacked, and then we were additionally demonized as these baby killers and crazy maniacs and so on and so on. And if you create an image of subhumans or savages, and then you can bomb these people back into the Stone Age, and then you can say, "Oh, look how underdeveloped they are." The same happened in Iraq. I mean, they said, "Oh, like these are these sand monkeys." The soldiers were using all these sorts of racial slur and so on and so on. But they were not saying, they were not telling people, "Oh, it's Mesopotamia. It's one of the oldest places in the world, which is basically the cradle of civilization." So I think this is intentional. I think they want to create the image of lesser, subhumans. This idea was essentially patented by the Nazis, and then considering considering the way that the political West functions today, and considering the fact that a lot of Nazis moved there and then became prominent scientists and people in the intelligence services, we can see that this idea is being implemented everywhere. And whenever they want to attack someone or demonize someone, they're just going to go ahead and say all these things on TV or in movies and so on.
I do want to add what you just said. I was listening to a program just in the last few days. During the Second World War, when the British wanted to dehumanize the Germans so that the war could continue and they can have support, they couldn't say, "Oh, Germans are white like us, Europeans like us," right? That Queen Victoria married a German, so our king is half German, right? So they started degrading the Germans who are like as white as the English. They're both Saxons, right? Saying that they're not white, they're not from the white race. So this idea, I don't think is a Nazi idea. I think this idea goes back, I don't know if it's the British who invented it, First World War, Second World War, how far back. But this idea of whiteness, how to use it and how not to use it. In the United States, if you were Italian at the beginning of the 20th century, you were not classified as white.
Yeah,
Italian.
The same for Greeks and same for Greeks and Eastern Europeans. And like if you were a Polish guy, I mean, Poles are pretty white, as you said. Like Poles are as white as Germans and English, but they were not considered white. I mean, the whole idea is just
Exactly.
ridiculous.
So then what they decided to do as the decades went is to say, okay, so anyone who's Christian is white. So there was a case where there was a Lebanese who had moved to United States, they become resident and they applied to become naturalized. At that time, you had to go in front of a judge. Judge will decide if you become naturalized US citizen or not. And he says, you can't be, you're from Lebanon, so you're not white. He goes, no, but I'm not Muslim, I'm Christian. So the judge goes away, comes back, and goes, no, because you're Christian, you're classified as white and you can become a US citizen. Anyone who was white would be allowed to become a US citizen. Chinese were not allowed and so forth. So this idea of what's white has changed according to the culture and the context of his time. So the Germans, I do feel sorry for you sometimes because the English also picked on you and said that you're not white, even though being a white or not being white is not necessarily a good or bad thing. But this idea that the Germans always, in every single movie, the Germans are seen as the baddies and the Nazis. It's like sometimes I think I watch TV and I think I've never seen any of this footage, the archive footage about the war, Second World War. How is it possible they have so much archive footage of German and Germany, Second World War? Who was filming all of this? For 5 years, there was a war, and yet they have been making documentaries for 50, 60 years, and none of the footage is repeated. Where do they keep getting this footage from? How does this manage? So this idea, I think, is also, we have to be careful that how we discuss whiteness in the context. It's not just, we can say, a German issue problem. It's a northern, it's a European issue that's gone into America as well.
It's
Certainly.
I want to mention something to this. The interesting thing is when the Second World War started, Hitler conquered Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg by attacking the military bases. They didn't attack a lot the civilians. And this was the classical strategy of war until this moment. But Winston Churchill started the bombardment of civilians, and this was the change of the war since that time. Yeah. So the question is, who is evil?
And it's interesting because the Israelis, they use the attack on Dresden and the Second World War and this as but the English did it. So why can't we attack civilians as well?
Yes.
Right?
And
It's
this
like,
was
okay,
done by the Allies the first time. The Germans started the war, yes, but they attacked only military equipment, military personnel, not civilians.
I mean, if you look, I'm not a Second World War historian, but before the bombing of the cities by the UK and all these different countries that started to bomb eventually the cities, when the war happened, other than Russia, maybe Soviet Union, Leningrad, I have to check into that. But in Europe, I don't remember reading that they attacked infrastructure and the sites and the tourist sites or whatever, the national sites of the country. So the Eiffel Tower wasn't destroyed, the Notre Dame was not destroyed, these things, yeah, they took over the power of the country, but they never destroyed these countries. But then you have people like Donald Trump. While he was president, he goes, oh, if Iran does this, we'll hit 50 national sites, not military sites, but 50 national sites of the country. And then you have Israelis completely destroying all Christian churches going back 1,500-600 years, the oldest churches in the world, completely destroyed. Mosques, I think they even destroyed synagogues, historical sites, and things that go back hundreds and thousands, hundreds of years, and some of them thousands of years. And it's like there's a modern understanding of war that started with this Zionist and US idea of shock and awe, where they completely destroy everything. So you're like, I submit to you, please don't kill me anymore.
Yes.
And then you think to yourself, why are people surprised that you have people in this region who hate America so much to such extent? is because not only did they take over your country, they also want to destroy your heritage and your identity so that you
Well,
become completely empty.
this was
It's more or
happening
less
in Eastern
communism.
Europe, actually. This was
It's more
happening
or
in
less.
Eastern Europe to all of us. Just wanted to add, sorry, Hartmut, just wanted to add, the Germans, what Hartmut is saying is mostly referring to Western Europe. So if the Germans moved into Denmark, they wouldn't kill civilians, or when they moved into France, they would mostly not touch the civilians. But when the Nazi army moved into Eastern Europe, it was a whole different thing. They literally obliterated everything. And for example, when my country was attacked, one of the first things that they destroyed was a national library with with our national and museums with our national history going back like 15 centuries. And we lost around 300,000 documents which were written in Old Church Slavonic, which was like a language used 1,000 years ago. So I think what Western countries often do when they invade other countries is they want to purposefully destroy their heritage in order to simply, destroy the identity and to degrade the culture. And we've seen that many, many times. It doesn't matter if it's the Germans or the US, the UK. This is what they mostly target first, and then, as you said, those national sites, and then they target civilians.
I would like to mention something to this. The situation is that Hitler made an agreement with the Vatican. For example, we implemented church tax in Germany, and at the same time, by getting all the money, he also made an agreement that he can use the the banking system worldwide. And you must understand that the Vatican is the biggest enemy of the Vatican is the Orthodox Church. And the east part of Europe is Orthodox. And at that moment they had, let's say, more or less, I have a book here, Vatican Assassin, by Reza John Vedadi, and you can see the Archbishop with the people, with the highest people of Germany sitting together. And for this reason, this is one reason. The other thing is, it's a question of timeline. When we have to see when was the bombardment of the UK, when does it start, and did Germany destroy civilians before that as well? It's a question, because the war where how Churchill fought was a complete different one. It changed the complete war. How they made the bombardment of the civilians. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. That's the time we had for today, for this episode. But there's many more hours in the future that we could all come together. But I think that would be a perfect ending, unless Reza has more hopeful thoughts for the future, for the 2025. Hey, why don't you invite our audience also to connect with you? And thank goodness you are in the filmmaking, because as you said, please, we expect more of you when you do all these documentary films. So any last few words for our audience, and invite them? And I know you are in Instagram and LinkedIn, so you could get in touch there with our guest, Dr. Reza John Vedadi. But
I just want to thank your guests as well. Thank you so much. And also, I want to wish everyone who watches this for a prosperous, healthy, and peaceful 2025. It's been 3-4 years of COVID, and then a war, and another war, and genocide, and everything. So I hope really this year things turn around for all of us, especially those who watch this, and especially those who are right now hearing bombs and seeing bombs and destruction. So we pray for them, and we wish all of them, and those who are Orthodox, we wish you a Christmas coming up in January. A happy Christmas to you.
Thank you.
and as always, I will invite you for Dragos. Okay, he has a Telegram, and that's Sir Funhouse, and his articles are infobricks.org as well. And one Quantum Nurse has a Telegram that you could follow if you missed this. But we're always in Rumble. If you have to search me, just do Quantum Nurse Rumble or do me in Telegram, okay? So thank you. And Hartmut, thank you very much. And to yes, we wish everyone a better new year, but it's going to be so exciting. Expect the unexpected, because out of this rubble, eventually, hopefully in our lifetime, we see the progress of it, okay? But if nothing else, for the children. Thank you. And remember, like, subscribe, and donate however you can. And do take care of yourself and stay alive and be well. Take care. This is Grace Asagra of Quantum Nurse Freedom International live stream. Thank you.